and harmonizing with nature. With over 4 decades of changing lives, your self-discovery archaeologist, get ready to be the best of you with your host, Beverly Zymet.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Beverly Zymet Show, where being that best you is going to get real easy today. My guest is Cheryl Clark, calling in from, is it Toronto?
It is Toronto.
Toronto,
Yep.
Okay, Canada. She's my little Canuck, right? We've known each other, gosh, Cheryl, a long time.
I'm going to say 7, 8 easy, if not more. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, something like that. But that's not counting the eons of lifetimes before, right?
That is very true. Very true.
Yeah. You know, sometimes when you meet people, there's just that like instantaneous bond, you know?
The click, and that there's nothing, and it's undescribable, and yet it's unplanned, and it can't be coerced into happening. And so, yeah, absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes a friendship really unique. And again, when you just get to know people, and that's what I really love about this show when guests come on, because I don't talk to my guests prior to coming onto the show. And it's like, oh, and by the end of the show, it's as though you've known them all your life, right?
Yeah, it's huge. The sharing in it. So thank you for having this platform and opening it up to everybody to have a voice and have the opportunity just to have a conversation. Because I think sometimes in today's world, the organic conversation is lacking. We often tend to be so scripted or so agended, for lack of better words.
Yeah, and that is so true. It's like, oh, if I don't know what I've got pre-planned to say, you know, oh my gosh, I mean, I do workshops like, you know, that was my bag, she always say, to do, right? And when I first started with workshops, I'd go through and I'd have my outline and I'd write everything up and ready to go. And as soon as I got up there on that stage, everything went out the window. And it's like, after 2 or 3 times of this, is why am I spending all this time when I don't even talk about that stuff, right? Because I scan the audience and say, okay, what does the audience need to hear? And you can't pre-plan that, right?
You just brought up 2 points in my brain. The scripted thing, number one, what does the audience need to hear? It totally takes us from the ability to read the audience and be able to gauge where their interest is and watch their facial expressions and their body movements, which I think is huge for any presenter or speaker to do. But number 2, I always found that the scripted agenda, when I got off stage, became a moment of negativity, for lack of better words, because I'd look at that script and go, dang it, I didn't cover this. And I didn't cover that well. We never looked at the script and said, boy, I nailed this point. Boy, I nailed that point.
Exactly.
Self-defeat standpoint, as in I didn't get this across, and I forgot to use that analogy, or I forgot to use that example. And so I totally, unlike you, I get the whole first agenda, but I'm not scripted whatsoever either. And I think that's where I love when we get to converse, because I know that we're not scripted and we just flow with where it needs to go.
Right.
So.
And you know, we picked a word today to talk about, and that word is doubt, right? And so when you look at doubt and what we were just talking about, why do people feel that they need to be scripted, right? And I think my voice just went down here. There we go. You know, so when you look at that scripting and how confident are you in what you're doing and what you're saying and what you're presenting, right? So if you have doubt in yourself, where does that doubt project? To your audience, right?
Well, you know, and I also think that in a crazy way, we don't own our doubt. And so, and I mean it from the standpoint that coming from a stage presenter, when I start to doubt myself, it's because I'm making assumptions based on what I think the audience is perceiving. So I am literally allowing myself to fill with doubt by putting words and thoughts into the audience's mind. That person's looking at me like they're not listening. This person's disengaged because they're looking at their phone. I must not be doing a good job now based on 2 other people, and I'm assuming what their thought process is. And so therefore, I'm literally, there's no fact saying, hey, you're not doing a good job at this point, but we're internalizing and making the assumption based on our perception of what's going on, rather than based on, for speaking to someone who's in part of the virtual reality, but rather than based on what's going on. And I tell you, it's a conversation that we have in the small business world all the time. We censor on other people's behalf. They won't be interested in my message. They don't need to buy my products or services. They won't be interested in my business model. And my thought process is that is, how dare you speak on their behalf? Give them the education and allow them to speak back. So it's kind of like that self-doubt thing, you know, instead of saying, I didn't do good today, put it out there. How did I do? And let them fill it, instead of us doubting ourselves from our core with no real reason to be even doubtful.
Right. And again, it's all about asking that right question too, right? Now, here again, we assume. So when we go and assume, it makes a what out of you and me, right? And so when you start to look at it from that perspective and what the audience is doing, so yeah, these machines, wow, they can really distract. However, this is what I started doing when I see people picking up their phones, you know, and if I'm out there, rather than getting distracted about it and saying, oh, wow, now they're not paying attention to me, I'm saying, wow, they're out there spreading the word. They're telling everybody that they're getting some really good juice here today, right?
No, or they're recording me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The positive becomes huge, but we don't. We twist it the other way. We got to rewind.
It is. So why is it? Why are we always led down that path? Why are we led into doubt instead of being led into, say, support or accomplishments, or, you know, why do we do that? Because we live in a negative world, right? It's almost like, you know, from birth, you know, when you come out of that canal, right, all of a sudden, boom, you're blinded, right? And it's almost as though you continue to be blinded throughout life. And what's the first word you hear when you start investigating?
The nose. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Or the don't do that, don't do this.
Right.
You know,
right.
Social stigmatisms put on everything, that this won't be acceptable, that won't be acceptable.
Right. And so then we start living this life like, well, okay, so if I'm going to be accepted and if people are going to like me, then I'm going to have to do what they tell me to do, or they won't like me. I need to be something that I'm really not, or I'm not going to be accepted, you know. Well, when you look at the world, there's billions of people on the planet, right? It's time for you to just be you. Who is your true identity? And when you can be you and continue to be that best you, don't put doubt inside yourself. Trust. Begin trusting everything that you do, everything that you say, because it's what you believe. And when you first start learning how to trust yourself, the subconscious is going to stand up there and say, wait a minute, what do you think you're doing out here? Because don't you remember way back when, you know? And so then the doubt comes in, because it's like, oh yeah, see, I was 5 years old and this happened, right? And it's like, seriously, 5? You know, so all of these things start shifting. But when you start believing and trusting in yourself, then the doubts and the fears can start to dissipate, right?
Well, it's a survival instinct, I think, in a lot of cases, in a lot of ways. Like survival, number one, that kicks in. But the other thing that comes to mind is too, and I said it in a chat that I had this week as well, that we haven't failed if we haven't tried. And so, but oftentimes we say, I can't do that. Well, how do you know until you've actually made the attempt? And so it's kind of, and that's always my pushback, you know. So then it's not, I can't do that, because you can't use the word cannot unless you physically tried and or mentally tried and found out that you're unable. Can't is an inability. And so it's not, I can't do that. It's, I won't do that. And then it becomes a matter of motivation and intention and action. And so oftentimes when you start twisting those words around, it becomes powerful for everybody. So when someone says to me, I can't speak on the stage, for example, since we were talking about stage presences with your virtual reality, I can't speak on a stage. No, it's not a matter that you can't, because you've never tried. It's a matter of that you won't. And then It's like, and then it's like everything starts to pivot that way. It's funny, there's a lady up here in Ontario, Canada, that started a group about women coming to the group just as they are on Facebook, and therefore dropping our shield and dropping our armor. And Brene Brown talks heavily about that in her book, Dare to Lead, and how we're all equipped with different armor to protect ourselves. And yet, dang it gets so heavy carrying it that a lot of the positive things can't necessarily penetrate us either because we've got that armor on. But in this group, literally, they asked at some point in the past couple of weeks, what's one thing you love about yourself? And some of the ladies chimed in with some amazing stuff. And some people didn't chime in, and you had to think that there possibly was a thought process there. But the ability to surrender to the circumstances is exactly what I put. Because I can surrender to the circumstances, recognizing that I can't necessarily change the circumstance. And so therefore I don't push my energy that way, but I work on pushing myself through the circumstance, and it becomes a different focus. And so then when it comes to doubt and trust, I think it's the same thing. I doubt the circumstance I'm in, absolutely. Right. But I trust my ability that I have survived everything up to this point, so therefore I'm going to survive this too. It's just a matter of the how.
Oh, that's powerful, Cheryl, what you just said. So when you recognize that doubt of the self, like you say, of the circumstance, because, events happen and circumstances are there and they're out of your control. So when you pay attention to the things that you can take charge of, this control is almost like a manipulation type thing where you're trying to force something. When you take charge of something, now you're stepping into your power, right? And into that trustability. So when you're looking at that doubt, and that questioning about yourself, if you don't take an action step, where are you going? You're going to just move right down into that abyss. But it's that action and really begin, like you said, to trust yourself to move through and survive that circumstance. Because the circumstance can be an issue. We can look at it as an issue or a challenge, right? So are you up for a challenge? Yeah. Are you going to be defeated?
The circumstance, I can't control the circumstance. Surrender to it. Wave that white flag.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop our ability to get to the other side of the circumstance whatsoever, unless you decide to put all your energy into changing a circumstance. And then we wear ourselves out. We can't change the circumstance. Therefore, we doubt our abilities because we recognize that we're not making any impact or change. You can't change the circumstance. So all you can do is push yourself through it. And so the circumstance is huge. And I think I probably learned that in my 10-month detainment with the immigration system of the United States. I couldn't change my circumstance. I was there for a reason. I was there for 295 days. I couldn't change, when I was locked down in my cell. I couldn't change handcuffs. I couldn't change the eating agenda. There's so much I couldn't change. I couldn't change my circumstance. But I tell you, I walked through those yards most days going, I won't let this place change me. I could still maintain my disposition. I could still maintain who I was at my core. I could still maintain, rather than becoming, hurt, bucking the system. It's just too big of a system. You can't buck it. Right. And so the surrendering to the circumstances became a huge opportunity for me. And it's one thing that I learned to love about myself. It doesn't mean I give up. I just recognize where my limited control is. I can't control my circumstance. All I can control is me. So the surrendering to the circumstance is very different than surrendering in general, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. And again, you really keyed on something here. A lot of people think if they surrender that they've given up. And that is like completely, false, because surrendering is not giving up. Giving up means that you have put yourself and everything in life on hold to not do, right? That's a choice to not do. But when you surrender, it's like, okay, now I'm going to focus. I'm not going to fight it. It's like trying to walk through a wall, right? How many times are you going to hit your head against that wall before you're saying, I think that wall is a little stronger than me. But so you surrender to the circumstances that's not the direction and the path you're going to go through to get to the other side. Now you surrender to that, and it's like, okay, now let's find another way. Oh my gosh, all I have to do is walk 2 steps that way and there's a door, right? Oh my goodness, I can walk right through it. So surrendering, giving up is not even in the same dictionary, right? So and I love how you put that, surrendering to the circumstances, because it gives you an opportunity to then really, I think, get a focus on what is that circumstance. What are the things this circumstance says that I can't, that's going to prevent me to do. I mean, you look at the world today, you look at this whole COVID, thing, right? It's a circumstance, right?
Yep.
So what are you doing in your life, whether it's in business, in pleasure, in family, what is going on with those circumstances that are out of your control?
Yeah, because we can't control what's going on around us. We can't control how our countries or our states and provinces are handling it per se, and the impact it's having on us and the restrictions it's having on us.
Right.
So, but by the same token, so I have to surrender to the circumstance. I'm very limited in what I would call my normal activities. But by the same token, and surrendering to the circumstance allows me the more energy to focus on what I can do. I can take this time to write extra blogs because I'm home. I can take this time to pre-plan my calendar. I can take this time to send handwritten notes where maybe I didn't have time before. Like, there's so much more that we can do once we let go of the fact that, once we let go of the circumstance, once we let go of the impeded restrictions that we feel are based on this.
Right.
That became, to me, it's huge all the way around. I can't control, same as I surrender to, people who may be disgruntled or people who may be in a negative headspace. I'm not out to change them. It's not, but I won't, when I surrender to their space and just realize that I'm sharing space with them, I don't have to necessarily change them, but I can now let them go, let them hold their own space, and recognize the fact that what I can control is my mindset while I'm in that area, and or my actions, and or my words. I don't have to necessarily join them and become part of that circumstance. And I think it's huge, surrendering to the circumstance. And I love that we define that there's such a difference between surrender and giving up, because that's huge.
Oh, so different.
Now, there's none of us that are probably, you and I, and or anybody watching this, have never really truly given up. Because if we had, we wouldn't be watching this. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, I gave up. No, you didn't. You paused maybe. You took a different direction. You had a different focus. You detoured. But if you had truly given up,
we would be on the planet even, Yeah,
exactly right. So that whole, I gave up. No, you didn't. You didn't give up, or else you wouldn't still be here. I know we said that, we saw that every day in that facility too. I'm just going to give up. No, you're not. You're going to go to bed tonight, and tomorrow's a new day. You're going to get up. You have no option at this point. And so it's interesting that way. I'm glad that we differentiated those between surrender and giving up, because it's very different.
And everything we're talking about here goes back into personal perception as well, right? Because we all have a database of information, and we all juggle it around to make it and justify it in our own beliefs, in our own truth, right? But the thing is when you are out there and you're open-minded and you give yourself permission, and this is key too, give yourself permission to be able to change. Just because you did that way 10 years ago and you've been doing it for that, long, doesn't mean there's not a different or even maybe a little better way to do it, right?
But then it also go back to the audience, because how many people will say, well, you didn't do that the last time. Well, that's okay. It goes back to how we allow others to impact our choices and our movements, because it's right, I didn't do it that way the last time. Maybe I should be doing it the same way I did it, rather than just recognizing the fact you're absolutely right, I didn't, and giving ourselves permission to take a different path at it. We allow the impact of others so much into us that I get it, because we're made for connection and we're made to be like that. And but yet there's not very many people, and I'm one of them, that can self-validate very well. I look for validation externally, and one day I hope that doesn't necessarily is always the case. But I've also been very blessed and fortunate to always have those outside my circle that validate, because I've intentionally chosen the right people, as in the positive ones, the ones that stand to make an impact in my world, rather than going with others that maybe not, and which becomes, we surround ourselves with, they say, is huge for us all anyway. But you're very true. We allow other people to impact us all the way through. You didn't do it that way the last time. Well, that's okay, but I'm going to do it this time. And that goes back to the conversation, the trust and the doubt, right? Well, now we start doubting ourselves. Am I actually going to go and do it right? Rather than having the self-trust. What's the worst thing that can happen? You back up and you do it a different direction. We always think that there's this impending doom that's coming upon us, and there's no.
Yeah.
We always think that, right? This is going to be the worst thing. No, it's not. It's just going to be a pivot moment. I can't. I've shared before. We put the energy and tie the emotion onto things, and I know that you believe in that too. And I always use the analogy: a flower dies, and if it was the last flower your great grandmother gave you before she passed, and the flower plant's now dead. You're sad. It's a negative thing that happened. Like you're hurt. You're remorseful. Da 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 da. But yet, to someone else, a plant dying is a blessing in disguise because they see now that dead earth being full of organic material that'll fertilize the next seeds coming up.
Right.
It's all like you said, it's all a matter of perception, right? That plant dying to someone is terrible. That plant dying to someone else is absolutely positive. And we tie the emotion to stuff. And it just, it drives me crazy how often we err. And like you said, human programming, we tend to lean towards the negative rather than, this stumbling block. I tripped here, but instead of, I didn't skin my knee, I'm not dead and I can get up and go. But yet we always focus on the fact that we might have tripped rather than thinking, well, I tripped, but that was way cool because I still learned something from it.
Right.
And having the positive energy behind it.
And I'm one, I totally believe in there's no such thing as coincidence, right? So every act of whatever has a lesson in it. So if you did trip, it's like, okay, so what tripped me up? Where was my thought at the time that caused that trip, that caused that fall or whatever, right? And so that's how my brain works, right? And usually I can, I figure it out almost 100% of the time. It's like, oh, well, maybe the message here was that if I continue down that path, it's going to trip me up and it's going to cost me a whole hell of a lot more than a skinned knee, right? And so, and that's how I look at things that happen in my life, right? So I question the movements to figure out why that happened. When something crosses my path, why did it cross my path? Because it was unusual. Like one day here in Denver, this was, like 4 months ago when I first got here. So I'm driving down the street. It's 6:30 in the morning, right? And I did not see it. It's almost like it had just like appeared right in front of me. This turkey, huge turkey, walking across the street in Denver. I'm like, where'd you come from? Like, what the heck? It was insane, and I couldn't quit thinking about it. So I had another 15 minutes to get to the office, right? And it's like, okay, I've got to look up what turkey meant, right? And where my brain was in my thought patterns, and right? So I look up spiritual meaning of turkey, and it's like, oh, okay. And, so all of these different things that cross my path, I look at being a message in it. So for me, traveling, because I spend so much time on the road all the time, and when I finish in an area, or if I'm going to an event or something, right, I always see a hawk. Doesn't matter what state I'm in or where I'm at, I see this hawk. And that's my message. You're going in the right direction. You're safe. Follow through, right? So a hawk is really a totem for me and has given me a lot of, again, that confirmation, that validation. And we talked about that earlier, right? Getting that validation. So it doesn't matter where you get that validation. It matters you pay attention that it was there.
Oh, huge. Actually, yes. True. Very.
Right.
It's something you made me think too when you talked about movement and stuff. Intentional movement.
Right.
There's a difference between us moving on our own accord and us being pushed.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Think about that too when it comes to, and I've used that, are you running your business or is your business running you? Are you running your business or are you managing your business? There's so many different words there that can be utilized, but it's kind of like, am I running my business or am I being pushed through my business by being responsive to the last message, the last email, the last phone call that came in? Or is my day pre-planned and therefore I'm going to get things done intentionally because I'm driving? And it becomes huge, the movement side of things too. It's, and it's true. We sit there, I'm just as guilty. There's times when I sit in front of my laptop and I don't know what to do next. And therefore whatever pops up happens to get done. But then that's not me gearing and guiding my movement. And I think that I think self-accountability becomes huge. And I also think self-intentional action becomes huge for sure. But and actually that kind of focuses on everything we've just said too, because that's the whole, I can't surrender to the circumstances, but take responsibility for me in the circumstance. And so therefore I can't control the outside sources. I can only control what's happening here and where I'm physically guided and taking it. And same principle when it comes to everything with movement, right? You know, it's kind of like, if I end up where I don't want to be, it's like, did I really take myself there, or did I allow myself to be pushed there? And that whole thought process becomes a huge thing for most of us, that we allow other, you know, someone else says, well, I need to be, someone else says, I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that. You're being pushed there because you feel the pressure to go, rather than you analyzing it and deciding that you want to go on your own accord, right? And I think sometimes we do that because it takes the accountability out of it. Well, I did this because Bev said I should, and now if it fails, it's Bev's fault. But if it succeeds, you got credit for it because I did it, right? And so it's true, like it becomes a huge thing. And that way, the self-accountability, you know, it's like, well, this didn't work out because I didn't implement it correctly, or I didn't put all my effort into it, or, you know, or I wasn't educated enough on whatever it is, and now I have a learning and I have some skills to gravitate towards, and then let's try it again, right? But the self-accountability becomes a huge opportunity for all of us too. But are we moving ourselves, or are we allowing ourselves to be moved?
And that's a really good point too. And we can be our own best friend or our own worst enemy. Right? And that's that self-conversation that you have. Again, it goes back into what? Self-doubt or self-trust.
Yeah.
Right? So which side of the fence are you on? You know, I wrote a book on that. Which side of the fence are you on? The world of duality.
Did you really?
Huh?
I honestly didn't know that. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's out on Amazon. It's been out there for a few years. You know, because we do live in that duality, and it is choice. You know, even if you don't make the choice to do or to not to do, you still made the choice.
Yeah.
Right.
And self-doubt can play a role within reason. If there's doubt, it makes you question things. It makes you think it through a little bit more. It makes you have a, you know, that whole, maybe do a little bit of research, maybe ask someone else, you know, and partner up that way and stuff like that. I think there stands to be some positives to self-doubt, but when it becomes a concrete brick that you're constantly dragging, eventually you'll not want to drag it anymore. And therefore, that's when I think that the whole immobility thing happens, and you're no longer moving where you want to move, right? Because you've allowed it to, instead of it allowing it to be a caution and a thought process before you shift, we allow it to be a total roadblock and cause, you know, taking us off course.
You know, and sometimes we actually, you know, need to see the complete block before we can recognize and say, okay, Houston's got an issue, right? And, you know, because we want to be right. Let's go into this right and wrong, right? Is there really such a thing as right and wrong? In my world, there isn't. You know, it's like Henry Ford said, if you think you're right, you're right. If you think you're wrong, you're wrong. So where is right and wrong other than the perception of what your belief is, what has become your truth, right? So when you can put everything aside and say there's no right, there's no wrong, there's my is, right? Because what my is, not necessarily Cheryl's is, or any one of you out there listening, it's your is. Know your is, and then respond and react to it. And again, we got that action, reaction, right? And we respond and we react on circumstances in how we interpret our is. Is it right or is it wrong? Is it good or is it bad?
That word wrong, when sometimes that word can be so positive. You know, I was wrong about this. Well, and if it turned out to be a positive wrong, you know, and the tying the emotion to it is, and I think that's, I've been able to, in some circumstances, so some of those people watching will know that I'm not 100% honest in this moment, but in some circumstances, I've been able to disengage emotionally and come at it from a logical standpoint. But how often we see people react on emotion, and it's human nature. I get it. But the ability to be able to disengage emotionally or take that step back, and yet we're fearful sometimes of taking that step back or hitting that pause, thinking that we have to react every time. And my answer is, I don't have to react. You may be waiting for a reaction, but doesn't mean I have to give you what you're waiting for.
Exactly.
It's like, when we get that, I think, a disgruntled client or a disgruntled customer, coming at us with the emotion of, being disgruntled, angry, disappointed, whatever it happens to be. Let them come at you. That's their prerogative and their right, to express themselves. And there is, like you said, which is huge. But it doesn't mean that I have to join them. It doesn't mean that I have to react right away. There can be, you can even validate them. I see you and I hear you. Done. And it's, I one of my clients that I work for, I have 3 or 4 large ones, and one of them tends to be always wanting to be so apologetic when they feel that the client's not happy. And I get that there's power in the words, I'm sorry. I totally get it. But there's also disempowerment in expressing those words, in always feeling like you're wrong all the time and always feeling like you need to apologize. And my standpoint in that is not that I don't need to apologize, but my standpoint is my apology is not necessarily going to change the circumstance. And so, not that I'm not remorseful, but I'd rather just focus on moving from it and moving forward from it. So it's kind of like you can sit there feeling angry and disgruntled, and I can join you there and say, I'm sorry, you're right, I messed up, and totally go through this self-doubt, self-deflation mindset and sit there with them. Or I can let them say how unhappy they are, how disgruntled they are, and I can stand out here in my power and say, I hear you, and that was the past, and then going forward, this is how I see we can rectify this situation and pull them up to where I am, where they're partnering with me and making it right and going forward. And it all depends on where we decide to sit. The right and wrong thing, same principle.
Right.
It's like they're right in their feelings. There's no such thing as right or wrong, right? Just like you said, there is. They're entitled to their feelings just as I'm entitled to mine. And so it's like, how can we get those to come together and push them forward and make them happen? And I've said 1,000 times, stop apologizing. Your apology is not going to change the circumstance or the situation. So how are we going to change the circumstance and the situation?
Right.
And move it forward and take them with us forward rather than letting them sit and stew in whatever feeling that they're having. It becomes a huge
Well, yeah, and it's that recognition, to recognize that something needs to shift here, and where they're used to going, it becomes a habitual thing, that we respond a certain way, and you don't know what has happened prior to the time that they came to you. So it might not be anything, and 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with the conversation, between the two of you. It has to do with maybe one word that triggered an event, a situation that happened just prior to them showing up here, and boom, they exploded because they didn't get a chance to do it there. And now all of a sudden, here it is, and everything comes out. So watch yourself and how you respond and react to things like that too. And it's cell memory. It's a habit. So we have all these different habits that we do. And when you begin to recognize the habits that you're created, those are the things that Houston needs to change if you want to keep getting better and better in yourself, right? Because all of those issues that are showing up repeatedly are influencing you to be predictable and stagnant.
Yeah.
Right?
And recognize that people handle logical brain folks, there's emotionally brained folks. I mean, everybody handles things differently.
Right.
It becomes a huge, I try and live by 2 mottos, and Wayne Dyer, and I know that you love him too.
Oh, I love Wayne Dyer, yes.
And see the light in others and treat them as that's all you see has become a lifelong motto for me. There is absolutely behaviors, and I use that word very cautiously, and some that doesn't resonate with me. And I'm being very intentional with my words, because there's no such thing as me saying they have bad behaviors and or their behaviors are wrong or their behaviors are negative. They're behaviors. There's no right or wrong, like we had said. And so they have behaviors that does not resonate with me, that does not meet my personal standards or my personal goals for myself. has nothing to do with them, but see the light in others so and treat them as all that you see becomes a huge model. It's like I may not necessarily resonate with something that I see them doing on a basis, but there's going to be positives in that person that I can totally gravitate towards and highlight. And I think, I use that example on social media. We see people posting a whole bunch of negative stuff all the time, or what we perceive to be negative based on our own truth. And it's like, rather than saying, I wish you wouldn't post that, which feeds the negativity, or that the little thumbs down or giving it the little sad face, or I choose not to validate the negativity. But when they post something like, here's a picture of my dog enjoying the fresh air, or something along those lines, validate what we hope to see more of. And so it's like, dang, I like that post. It's good to see you're having a great day today, and like validate and highlight what we hope to see more of. It becomes a huge opportunity. And the second motto I try and live by is, I don't care where you've been, I only care where you're going. And recognizing that everybody absolutely has a past, myself included. It doesn't matter where you've been. Where you've been has gotten you to where you are today. Honor that. But I don't care where you've been. I only care where you're going. It doesn't matter. A lot of people tend to drag their past with them, and cling to it rather than just letting it go. Like, I was there, absolutely, but I'm not there anymore, and I'm here now, and this is where I hope to go. It's the only thing we can predict. And I think that when it comes to the doubt and trust, we recognize patterns in ourselves, and we keep honoring those patterns because we're dragging them with us rather than just letting them go and trusting that we can make different choices, or we can make different steps than what we have historically in the past. It becomes a huge opportunity for us.
It does. And when you're dragging that past with you, it is an old habit. So it's become a personality trait and a belief, a truth within you, but there's a conflict. And you have that inner conflict, but you don't know how to get past it because it's all running on autopilot. So when you can recognize that there is this autopilot that you don't want anymore to make changes, what can you do to shift it? That's when the real fun happens. So how can I become a better me by removing these things I no longer want to have in my life? And I want to see more. Letting go of that past. Letting go of all of that distortedness, right? Because it really isn't truth. It's become your truth because you've allowed it to become that reality and that automatic personality, rerun continuously. And that's what the rewiring of the brain has to do. So when you can, first you got to recognize that Houston has an issue that they want to change. Surrender, as we talked earlier, right? Surrender to it and then acknowledge it that, okay, that's been my truth. Because when you can surrender that to the truth of the circumstance of whatever that is, now your subconscious is more willingly and freely ready to give it up. Because it's not going to hold on to it like it's my possession, it's mine. Because you said, oh yeah, you're right. Oh, okay. It's like a little kid when you give them a new toy. And then somebody else comes along, another little kid comes along, and they want it. And you what? No, you got to share. Well, we share each other's miseries and our and downfalls and everything, right? So we do take that upon ourselves as well. And that just increases that negative emotional attachment and makes it stronger and stronger. So when you begin to recognize that, and you allow that surrendering to the circumstance to happen, you can eliminate the charge. And that's all it is. An emotion is just a charge that's feeding that situation, that circumstances. When you can then release it because you've recognized that, now you can add to what you want. And I promise you, this is the most fun part when you start doing that, because you are predictable. And all of a sudden you're shifting your reactions and you're not responding to people that are pushing your button to get that response out of you, which is a control and manipulation and a power pull. And all of a sudden you're not responding in that predictable manner. They're going to look at you like, are you okay? Something wrong today? Right? Because you're not being...
No, go ahead.
You're just not being the you that they know.
Yeah, that they know, keyword. Yeah. And that the cliche of be in the moment becomes huge in that thing. All I can control is this moment. There's no point in being in my past. I can't control my future. And so it's like, be in the moment. That cliche becomes huge. It's like, this is what I can do now, and this is what I'm going to do now.
Yeah.
and that becomes a huge opportunity for all of us to just go of things. But also, I think that, I think of the people that always have to have the last word per se when,
Oh gosh.
there's so much violence. But boy, we're a reactive society, and totally. And so same principle, it's like we always want to retort. We always feel like, and sometimes we view our ability to retort as expressing ourselves and being true to ourselves. When sometimes being true to yourself is silence as well. It's like,
Oh gosh. Silence is golden.
it's huge. And I didn't feel like I needed to retort because there was no benefit of it, and I don't need to be heard by you that badly. And so it's like you just shut down, and it's not a shutdown from a emotional standpoint. It's a shutdown from maintaining your power and holding your own peace. And so it's kind of like, and I think that sometimes that becomes a huge opportunity too. I've had so many people say, what do you think of the Trump administration? And what do you think of the immigration crisis? And obviously, I lived it. And I, even up here, how do you think of, how the government's handling the COVID crisis? And, are you Democrat or Republican? Are you liberal or conservative on this side of the border and stuff? And I have an opinion just like everybody else does, but my opinion is not going to change yours. And so therefore it becomes my opinion, and I don't need to voice it in order to feel validated in it. And so it's, and my getting my opinion out there on politics, the immigration stance, the Trump policies and stuff like that isn't the focus of my life. The focus of my life is to move myself forward and have some rich experiences and to better people and to help some of the small business people grow. And so it becomes like, what's your focus today? We see people picking up on the controversies that are across social media. There's no one that goes onto social media and says, change my mind.
But some of the words that they're saying, you kind of read that right in there, right too.
Yeah, no one's, there's have a stance opinion, and they're not necessarily going to change their opinion. And I don't need to be heard that badly to try and force my opinion on somebody else. And it's like, let them go and let them have it that way. And the only time so I want to clarify that, because the only time that I will speak up against, especially the immigration thing, is when there's a humanitarian standpoint in it. And so it's not necessarily the policies of the immigration stance. It's not necessarily the policies the Trump administration put in place or the Obama administration. But when it comes to from a humanitarian stance, I won't speak to the administration and or the legalities of it, but I'll speak to the human side of it and what that human deserves. And that becomes a different when it comes to that.
And I think, what you just said there, Cheryl, is really relevant in every aspect of life, is the humanitarianism of it. Right at the beginning of this conversation, we started talking about virtual reality, right? And when you look at in the virtual reality, all inhibition is gone. And everybody just gets to be, right? And we're looking to create a planet where there's harmony and there's peace and that humanitarian and how we treat others, and treating others in the way we want to treat ourselves, and move away from all the racism and the sexualisms and the religionisms and the governmentisms and all of that stuff, right? And thinking that that's what is making us who we are. But again, are we being pushed or pulled? Right? And what is your purpose for being here? And what I have discovered in that virtual reality world, and it makes me question, is that more the reality of the world, the real thing, versus what we're fighting in unbalancing out here? Because in an avatar, it's like everything drops. You can design that avatar to look and to feel and just to be you. Why aren't we just being us here in this, what we call the real world, right? So it really kind of puts you in a position to start questioning. And again, here we go. Questioning and doubting are two different things. Doubting puts you in a stagnation. Questioning says, I have a choice. Which choice am I going to go? What am I going to do with the circumstances that are presented to me? Am I going to try to crash that wall, or am I going to wander and find the doorway? to move to the other side of it. So a lot of things that we've been speaking about here today, when you start to put them all together, in one phrase, it gives you a real simple way to move forward out of the past into the now. Because if you don't want your future to look like what's back there, you better make some changes right here, right? Because you can't change that. If you broke an egg 5 minutes ago, you're not going to put that thing back together. Ain't going to happen. It's just not going to happen, right? Yeah. So, like they say, don't cry over spilt milk, right? Don't cry over a broken egg. So, let it go. Get present. And go forward.
Well, and I also think that the huge part is too, when you just said the avatar world and stuff, I think that in the digital world per se, and I know that you and I had used the phrase earlier, keyboard warriors. I think that in that aspect that we're more apt to want to get our real selves out there,
right? Because
we're not afraid or fearful. Or actually the better word is we don't censor ourselves based on what other people are, we don't censor ourselves based on what other people may be thinking or feeling of our words. When I'm standing in front of somebody, I'm like, don't say that because it might make them mad. Don't say that, it might hurt their feelings. Don't say that, it may go down a negative path. And so I start censoring myself based on what I think you're going to feel, which is totally unfair to you, because now I'm placing restrictions, barriers on you when it's right. Not fair. Because you're an adult, you have your own mind, you should be able to speak and voice yourself. And so here I am censoring myself and suppressing my messages or suppressing something that I want to say based on my perception of your response, which is not right. But I think we lose that in the virtual realities and behind the keyboards, because now it's like, you know what, I don't know how they're going to see this, but I need to say it.
Right. And then you're true to yourself, right? Exactly. Now you remove the doubt. And you're true to yourself, and you speak that truth, right? Yeah. And, I look at it from the perspective, too, when you have that voice and you're speaking your truth, what you're doing is you're helping someone else to say, wow, oh my God, they actually had the balls to say that. I've been wanting to say this. I feel it, and I felt like I was alone, and there was nobody out there that, that understood me, but they really get me. So sometimes when you do hold yourself back, because like you said, you're censoring your thought process of what you need to express, when really maybe in essence, that's exactly what that person needs to hear, not the censored version.
Yeah, isn't that true? And I get the fear is real of ruffling feathers and stuff, but by the same token, it's only, and this is going to sound very curt and weird, but it's only an emotion.
Well, and that's true. And it's not just the emotion, Cheryl. It's how you interpret.
Yeah. And emotions, feelings come and go. They change. And if they don't, and someone's holding on to it, God love them for carrying that. And it's like go and bless and release becomes. It's funny. I adopted the word unapologetic, and I had someone question me on that. Another business coach questioned me on that. How can you adopt the word unapologetic when you're in the people validation business and you preach it? And just because I don't need to be apologetic to you to validate you, and I don't need to being unapologetic doesn't have anything to do with, now, if I hurt you, absolutely. When your truth is you're hurt by my words, whether that was my intent or not, I can validate your feelings. I am sorry you are hurt. My intention wasn't to hurt you. So let me clarify my intention. But it doesn't mean I'm sorry for my words. My words were true to me and I spoke them. Therefore, I'm unapologetic. I'm sorry you're hurt. Absolutely, I'm sorry you're hurt. And I'm sorry it's my words that did it, but that was not my intention. And so therefore, it's their perception of what I said. But it becomes a huge opportunity for all of us to just be authentically ourselves. But we suppress that. We doubt it because we so badly want to be
accepted and liked. Yes, exactly.
Loved, have a crowd around us, have a gang around us and stuff like that. When, like you said, there's times when some of those words, become huge opportunity. And that's where I think that, the keyboards have given people a way of I think of all the stuff, mental health stuff, all of the ones that are, you need help today, text.
Right.
Why did we gravitate towards that world? Because I would rather text my dilemmas and problems than voice them. And so it becomes that huge keyboard warrior moment. But yet some people tend to be much more truthful that way. And I shared in one of my Friday flashes just last week, the week before actually, the words "I understand" close conversations. Don't understand.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, as soon as you tell me you're coming to me, I'm blue, I'm depressed, and I had anxiety this morning. I understand. Conversation's over. Rather than saying, tell me more, or how did that feel for you? What do you think took you there? How did you get past it? How are you going to get past it tomorrow morning? We don't open up the conversations. We've been taught in our world to empathize and meet them where they're at. But as soon as we come down and meet them where they're at, they think we understand. And some people's first response is, hell to the no, you don't understand, but you just, because it's me and you don't know how I feel because I haven't had the opportunity to express it, and they close off, right? But yet I understand from a sincere, intentional point, I want to be able to say, I get it. But yet by saying I get it, we also sometimes close the conversation. And it's huge that way. And then therefore, we hold them where they're at rather than pulling them up to where they can be. It's huge.
It is huge. And just words, I mean, one word can change the whole thought processing of of what the conversation is. It's just like you said, when someone feels hurt, it's usually just one word that they interpreted out of the whole thing differently than how you spoke it. And that's part of opening up those lines of communication, right? And so it's like, okay, obviously there was a word that I spoke that triggered something different in you, and it's like, what is it? Let's go through that conversation, because my intention was not that.
Yeah.
And some people will speak up and others won't, but again, when you see them face to face, or the silence on the other side, that, okay, something happened here. But again, it's not for you to watch every word coming out of your mouth like you're walking on eggshells around certain people. And I know we all have had that, where it's like every time I'm around this person, I got to watch every word that I say, or they're thinking I'm pointing the fingers at them, And when I'm working with clients, I also tell them, say, you know what? Don't take things personal. When you can move yourself out of the conversation, don't take it personal. Look at every event, every conversation as being like a mastermind, right? Because in a mastermind, everybody throws stuff out on the table and then they shuffle it around and say, whoa, okay, hey, we can take that piece and this piece and this piece, and now we have this project that's going to go somewhere. If you can look at your conversations as being a mastermind conversation, you're not going to take it personal. You're going to just have an open mind, listen to everything that's going on, what triggers got pushed and why, and maybe these are some things where Houston needs to make some shifting. Because again, being able to recognize some of our, and I hate this word, but some of our faults that have held us back with those bricks, from really being progressive in the direction we need to go, because we're too stubborn and bullheaded to say, and again it goes back to that right or wrong. No, you're wrong. You don't get it. You just don't understand. It's not for me to understand. It's for you. You can't convince me any different, because it's not my situation. Right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get you have an issue here. I get you've got something that you want to speak, but what is it you're really looking to speak? Don't try to convince me of something that I don't even, think it's not relevant to me, right?
And Houston's going to shift one way or the other. Like, Houston is constantly moving. So either you're guiding its movement or it's happening on its own.
Right.
And I think it's same stands to you're moving one direction or the other. Either you're moving on your own towards your own agenda, or someone's pushing you along. We're not standing still at any given moment. Houston's not stopped at any given moment.
It's like this world behind me. It keeps on moving.
Shifting. Yep, it's huge that way.
Yeah.
So it's like either, and then going back to the original theme that we had picked at the top of the conversation, it's like either you're going to doubt yourself or you trust yourself. It is a choice.
Yes.
It's literally, it's not like, oh my word, I just doubted myself. No. You made that conscious choice or subconscious choice to do that. So flip it. Like, I'm going to trust myself in this. I'm going to trust myself in that. I'm going to trust myself in that. And when you do have to say, I doubt myself in this, well, then there's a reason. And so it's like, am I doubting myself so that I'm a little more cautious? Am I doubting myself because I don't have all of the data to make an informed decision? Am I doubting myself because I just need to hold back a little bit and monitor some things first? But then it becomes, and key word, ourselves. I think ourselves has been huge in all of this conversation. It's like, surrender to the circumstances. I can only control this. Surrender to the circumstances. My mind's my thought, and then oftentimes the circumstances pivot based on our actions and or our inactions.
Right.
Like, I don't think, and I know, actually I shouldn't say I don't think, we don't understand the power of people.
No.
In a given time. And it's crazy that way.
In another statement I always like to say is, it doesn't matter what other people think of you, it matters what you think of you, right?
Mhm.
Because, end of the day, bottom line, it's all about you and how you perceive and respond.
So many people have a hard time self-validating, and like I shared, I'm one of them as well. And so therefore we do look for the external sources, but then, dang it, we need to make sure we're looking at the right people.
Right. And I like what you said about, doubt. When you recognize that doubt has stepped in,
Mhm.
there's a lot of attachments to it. It's like, okay, am I doubting it because I don't think I'm good enough or smart enough or whatever? Nobody's going to listen to me. All these crazy things that go on in her head. Is it just a self-defiance that's going to put you into an abyss? Or are you doubting yourself because, maybe you need to have a little more database before you make the choice, right? Or are you looking for something to blame? Who can I blame if it goes wrong? Let me see what, or, all of these little different aspects come around doubt. So take a look at what that word is when it shows up. Why did it show up? Are you going to run the same gamut with that doubt word? Or are you going to say, maybe I need to trust what the message is that this doubt is sharing with me? Where does Houston need to make that shift, right?
And play a game with it too. In some cases, going to another side of it is, am I doubting this? And so therefore I doubt it and it's not going to work, but I'm going to go with it anyway. As soon as you say you doubt and it's not going to work, but you're going to go with it anyway, you're absolutely right. It's not going to work.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm going to go through it anyway, and I'm going to play a game with doubt and prove doubt wrong. It's all, like you said, it's all a shift of words and all a shift of things. It's kind of like, Amy Johnson was a person in Arizona that was in my world and still is, thankfully. But she had shared in a networking meeting once, and I'll never forget it. It was probably 10 years ago, dang it. But she literally shared fear and excitement are the exact same emotion in our bodies, right?
Yes, they are.
And I know that it's huge when you start seeing that stuff. It's like, am I fearful? And I just need to shift those words that, no, dang it, I'm really excited. And it's like, I'm getting on stage for the first time. Am I scared? No, I'm excited that I have the opportunity. Shifting those things. Mel Robbins alludes to that too. And most of us know exactly who she is in the coaching world and the speaking world. And her book was on the 5-Second Rule was amazing.
Right.
But it's true, like that whole shift of, so I'm doubtful of this, but you know what? I'm going to prove doubt wrong. Let's go.
I'm going to trust myself on this one and make it happen. Because again, you can change that outcome by what you believe. Right?
Yeah.
So what the mind can conceive and believe, it does what? It achieves. It doesn't say, oh, well, that's a right thing and that's a wrong thing. That's a good thing. That's a bad thing. No, it just says whatever it is that you're creating up here is going to be a design that's going to show up there in matter because that's what you focused on.
And I love your outcome just hit me hard too. I can't change my circumstance, but I can change my outcome.
Yes.
So I can surrender to the circumstance and control how I come out of this.
Yep.
There's
that's the difference.
Right there. I can't control my circumstance. I'm going to surrender to my circumstance, but I can change my outcome or how I come out of this.
Right.
And so that's where our power and our control is, and it becomes huge. Surrendering to the circumstance, I can't tell you how beneficial that's been in my life, especially in my life.
What I tell myself when I get in situations like that, it's like, okay, so my mind runs and it's like, okay, worst scenario would be that. Best scenario, would be that. Well, you weigh the odds, this or this, right? It's like, well, you know what? That is not an option. That, woo, that's an option. So now that I know worst scenario, that's where I'm not going, because it's not an option for me. My option is to reach that highest. And that's what I focus on in Direct to Go. And that's what the universe, God, or energy, whatever you want to call it, is going to bring and make that vibrational, energetic match to get that outcome. Sometimes it happens really fast. Other times it takes a long time. But you know what? Again, where is your focus? If you focus on an outcome, that's what you're going to receive. What you label that outcome is your choice. It's your is.
Or it's a label.
It is a label. I know.
Everything. We tie it, the emotion there. And it's like, and I'm not saying that there's not situations where I get angry or I get hurt, and where I get, feeling blue and down and anxious and stuff. But I recognize the fact that I control my emotions, or I should have control over my emotions. And there's days when I don't, beyond a doubt. But I also recognize that today, where I may not feel that, tomorrow I'll feel different. And I've even, my close friend up here in Ontario that I've known for 30, 35 years, there's a couple people actually, and I'm blessed that way. I can say today is not my day. And not that I hold that space very often, but it's kind of like I recognize that today is not my day. Tomorrow is going to be okay, because I'm going to get up tomorrow and be totally different. But today I'm feeling it. And may not necessarily be able to tell you why I'm feeling it. I may not be able to tell you what set it off. I may not be able to tell you any of this stuff, but I just know that I'm in space. And I recognize that I'm in that space, and I'm okay with that. I surrender to it. I'm okay with it. I'm allowed to be in this space. I'm not going to resist it. I'm not going to fight against it. I'm not going to be pissy with it. I'm not going to curl up and lay in bed. I recognize I'm in this space. I'm going to let those that are closest to me recognize I'm in this space, because it may impact them as well.
Right.
But tomorrow will be okay. And tomorrow let me release me from yesterday. So if I was a jerk to you today, or if I was distant, cold, emotional, release me from that, because that's my past now. So in other words, I don't care where you've been, I don't care where you're going. Release me from what I did yesterday, because today's a new day for me, and I'm moving forward now. Right. It's huge.
It is huge. And again, it doesn't matter what other people think you matters what you. So how you believe and add that to it. And this kind of reminded me of a story that I heard a long time ago of a man who lost his daughter by, unpreventable circumstances. And he had this big event, party, something going on where there were going to be a lot of people there. People that knew him, knew his daughter, and whatever, right? And it was all ready to go. And that morning, he received a phone call that his daughter was killed. Now, nobody expected him to show up at this party, right? Because of what happened that morning, right? And he worked through it. Can he change the situation, the circumstance? No. And he went to the party, and everybody was like in shock to see him there. And he made an announcement to everyone that was there. He said, I know you're all shocked to see me here. And some of you may think I'm being disrespectful to my daughter. I love my daughter. Will I miss my daughter? Yes. Can I change the fact that she's no longer here? No. Does that stop my life or how I proceed? No. I live this way. My daughter has lived this way. And if she knew that I was wallowing at home and grieving her, that's not how we lived our life. That was not our truth and our belief. I can't change what happened, but I can change what happens right here. And time is precious. And if you learn nothing but that, time is precious. You can't change the past, but you can change how you respond to any circumstance. And it's like we've been saying over and over. What are you going to do with that circumstance?
Yeah, where's your power? Yeah, it's huge.
Right.
And I love that you said time is precious. Things can change in a dime. and we just, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And I will say that's my hard line with people. Some people, if I find that they're wasting time in hopes of tomorrow, or I'll have this conversation, I'll have a conversation tomorrow. I am living proof that things can change so quickly. And so it's kind of like, you know what, dang it, don't waste time, and don't waste my time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, recognize the moment, because this, like, A, it's gone quickly, but B, you don't know where your next moment puts you. You have no idea.
No, you don't. I mean, I think we all had that major wake-up call with this pandemic issue thing going on. Is, you know, life was going on, just moving like normal, what we call normal, right? And then all of a sudden, in a split second, it wasn't just one area or another. It was the whole world was in lockdown, right?
Yeah.
It's like, wow. So does life change in a flash? Yes. And then each one of our lives continue to do that. So it's, you live in the moment. We started this conversation here. Wow, we're coming up on an hour. Okay? It's like we get together as where does the time go, right? It's irrelevant. But when you look at where we started this conversation and where we're ending this conversation, and all the things that have been said, and the shifting that has gone on, where has the impact been? I know just by listening with this conversation, sharing in this conversation with you today, Cheryl, that there was so many morsels and big ahas that I am walking away with this. And that's one of the beauties of being, you know, on this show and being able to speak with speakers and people like you and me. Everyone is the same, but we're all different, but we're still the same, right?
I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you 100%, because of how we flow, but also at times we reinforce our own truths and our own beliefs.
Yes.
When we articulate them to somebody else. And it grounds us a lot more in what we're doing and where we're heading. And so I appreciate that opportunity from my learning standpoint and from my ability to be able to put my messages out there, but also ground them more in myself too, and let them become more of a foundational stone, an unpivotable one. So I appreciate that big time.
So honoring the self is honoring others, right? And again, you can't give out of yourself more than what you give to yourself. So fill your own cup before you start passing it out, because you can't pass out something you don't have. So if you're passing out doubt this way, you're going to pass out doubt that way. If you pass in truth and trust here, you're going to pass that out, right? So where do you want to be on that pivotal scale of what side of the fence? Everything attached with fear or everything attached with love?
And you only have so much energy. Can't control the circumstances. Just hold your ground.
That's right. That's right. And you don't have to convince someone. You know, so holding your ground is not convincing and creating a war. You know? Yeah. So, and just 1 second on that, on the war, right? The battles that we have, the conflicts that we have inside are relevant to the conflicts that we have outside of ourselves, right? But the people who, the circumstances, let's use that, the circumstance that wins is the one that gets surrendered to. Because when you surrender, there can be no more battle, there can be no more war. Now you can only have peace in how you feel and see and interpret peace, right? So take note, what's your circumstance, take charge of it, and make the outcome of that circumstance what you believe is best for you. Right?
Perfect. My friend, thank you.
Oh, Cheryl, thank you. Is there one more word you want to say to anybody?
Well, no, there's not one word at all. There'd be a series of words to it. So thank you for narrowing it down to one word. No, I am honored to share in so many people's journey. And I tell you, I've said even in Eloy, I even said the two biggest gifts that we can give anybody is time and trust in sharing our stories and our own truths with others. And so time is huge. Anybody who spends time sitting with somebody else or sharing with somebody else. Time and trust are the two biggest gifts in my world, and I'm honored to have that from so many people. And trust being, like I said, just them sharing their truths, part of their world, part of their story. It's all, we trust one another, and we have to. And it's funny enough, we can trust other people more quickly than we can trust ourselves in our own decisions sometimes.
Right.
But I am very honored and very blessed to share time and trust with so many people. And I tell you, I can't even amplify how grateful I am for that, no matter where I've been on my journey. And it continues to this day. So,
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us today. So it's time to go out there and say, go be that best you that you can be. Because Cheryl and I are going to be the best we that we can be. And I hope each and every one of you took away from here something special, because you are special. Bye, everybody.